Welcome to today's podcast episode of Little by Little Homeschool. I am joined today by Chandis, and she is going to share about a topic that a lot of us always ask about because 3 times a day, at least, at the bare minimum, we are feeding our kids, and sometimes it can be a struggle. So I'm excited about how this conversation today is going to help you, the listener. So welcome, Chandis.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I have loved your podcast, so thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I'm excited that now you're on this end, can be with me and we can talk about this. So can you share a little bit to the listener, just a little bit about you, your story, and who you are?
Okay, great. Well, my name is Chandis, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. And I grew up on a small farm, and I was able to see how our food was grown and go hunting and fishing with my family. So that was a really big part of my story, was learning where food comes from and just God's gift in all of that. And also starting in middle school, I started having some health issues. So thankfully, my mom came alongside of me and we worked through that together. But what we found was our family really struggles with balancing blood sugar if we're not intentional about what we're eating. So that's really where my love of nutrition began, was in childhood, and recognizing I can work at a high-performing level in school. I was a valedictorian. I graduated at the top of my class in college and played lacrosse through school and through college. But if my blood sugar got too low, it was almost paralyzing for me. So I don't know if any listeners have experienced this or if any of their children, but likely someone has experienced their blood sugar being out of balance, either too high or too low. For me, that looked like anxiety, shakiness, sweating, and not being able to focus on anything. It's almost like my body went into a shock or survival. So I remember a clear time of this happening. I had tried to golf 18 holes in middle school, and I didn't eat throughout those 18 holes. And by the end, I was shaking and needed to lay down, and it was really scary. So empowering myself through nutrition, and especially my family coming alongside of me to help learn that about my body, was very, very helpful. And another component with this is starting at 16, both my parents had their own small businesses, so they weren't able to be home a lot. And my mom would give me a blank check right when I got my driver's license. It was the first week, actually, that I got my driver's license. She gave me a blank check to go to the grocery store. And she knew that I knew enough about the foods that we ate at home and how to cook enough meals to help our family. She gave me the chance to do all of our family grocery shopping each week. So starting at 16, I got to do that. And it would take me 2 hours sometimes to go through the grocery store, aisle by aisle, really reading where are these companies from? What are they passionate about? What are the ingredients? So that was just our small town local grocery store. And that became so fun and exciting for me to become almost like a grocery expert for my family and start cooking meals from those foods. So all of this culminated to my love of nutrition. So by the time I got to college, I knew that's what I really wanted to do. I felt like God had wired me. I love to spread the gospel, but he wired me to understand science at a deep level, but teach it at a level that moms and kids can really understand. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, and I love it. I really enjoy it. Even at the co-op that we go to for homeschooling, I teach nutrition there. So it's fun to teach even 3, 4, 5-year-olds this information up to moms and grandparents. I'm very passionate about helping elderly with their nutrition as well. So that's a snapshot about where I came from and how I got to this place of being a very passionate Christian dietitian.
What I really love, I love all the story, but what I really love is that your mom recognizes, came alongside you, and you guys found a solution that's actually a long-term and that's actually going to benefit so many parts of your life, instead of just trying to put a Band-Aid on it or just kind of deal with it on a surface level. Let's get to the root cause. Let's really figure this out so that you could live fully and live well. And a lot of these things that come up with our kids is something that maybe they have to deal with, and empowering our children to know how their bodies work and how to fuel them so that we can work optimally to be able to do what God has called us to. And it's just so cool. That's so inspiring. So anybody listening who has kids and you're teaching them and giving them the ability to do things, to go grocery shopping, it's something that could be a lifelong benefit to them and something they might do lifelong as being able to help other people. So that's really neat. But I know that you're seeing and I'm seeing that nutrition is a hot topic nowadays. And I definitely appreciate that. I've learned so much myself just in the past couple of years, just online through different resources. But it does seem like there's so much information out there. And as homeschool moms, we don't seem to have a lot of time to sift through all of that information. So I know that you have two main areas that you focus on when it comes to nutrition. Can you share what those are?
Yes, definitely. So that's such a great point. There's so much data and information. I really feel like the enemy wants to scare us with statistics oftentimes, or almost knowing too much information without the helpful practicalities. So I really like to simplify it down into two areas. The first one being that eating close to nature is a wonderful tool we can give ourselves and our family. So eating close to nature looks like eating the foods that God has created for us. And the closer we can eat to those foods, the better off we tend to be. And there's so much science as to why processing foods, changing the energy, the water structure within them, all of that, we could go into the science of that, but really it comes down to God made us and God made our food. And when we eat close to the foods he gave us, it's like a puzzle piece that matches up really well. So that's the number one thing I teach. And I have an online video series that we can talk about later with that. But that is the number one thing to focus on, eating close to nature. And along with that, just as important, number two is balancing our blood sugar. So as you heard from my own story, that has been a really important part of my life for the last 20 years, is balancing my blood sugar. And we can eat close to how God made food, but if we only had grapes for the next 3 months, we would likely experience some mood issues, maybe anxiety, depression, behavioral issues, and sleep issues, because our blood sugar would be chronically too high, even with the beautiful things God's given us. But we don't want to have sweets all the time. So that's even in the sweet foods he gives us. We don't want to live on honey alone or bananas alone. And so balancing our blood sugar is a really important topic to learn about over time. And like you said, equip our kids at a young age to know how to fuel their bodies so that they can live out their spiritual mission as well.
So you guys eat close to nature and work on balancing your blood sugar. So what does a typical day of meals look like for your family?
Well, for us, we wake up in the morning and we start out by rehydrating. So I nursed for about 8 years, and I knew when I got up in the morning, the first thing I needed to do was drink something to replenish the fluids I had lost during the night when my child was co-sleeping and nursing. So I still start out hydrating myself. That looks like either non-caffeinated tea. I have a hot cocoa recipe I love that doesn't include sugar. So we use organic half and half, cocoa powder, and monk fruit or maple syrup is a great option too. And that's how my kids start out the day while I'm making breakfast. We've got this hot cocoa recipe, and I get all of those ingredients at Walmart or a grocery discount store. So we can talk about budget coming up here, but it's important to know that I have a budget when I'm feeding my family, and we're able to find these great foods at discount prices. So we've got our hot cocoa recipe. We also like lemon water in the morning, and I will add a little bit of sea salt for extra electrolytes, and that's just filtered water, lemon, sea salt, and I use a little monk fruit or maple syrup, especially in the summer when my kids will be outside a lot and it gets hot. We've got those days coming up soon. And so they replenish their fluids and electrolytes first thing in the morning. Then we move on to breakfast. Breakfast for our family is always something savory. So I don't start with like a plain piece of toast with jam. Instead, I start with a nonstick pan. That's a healthier option. You can use cast iron, enameled cast iron. We use green pans for nonstick. And we use plenty of butter and cook organic eggs, cage-free if you don't have organic possible. We have neighbors that have their own chickens, and so they're just so generous giving us their eggs. In exchange, I help with their craft days. So we start our day with butter, eggs, and then chicken sausage or uncured bacon. And that's a really savory breakfast that gets us to our schoolwork. We're able to sit down and focus. We do the majority of our schoolwork in the morning before lunch. once we've had that for breakfast, and I have all sorts of breakfast recipes that include non-egg options as well. But we move on to a protein or fat-rich snack. So balancing our blood sugar looks like eating foods that have protein, fat, and fiber. So those are the focus of our foods. Our snacks look like whole milk yogurt with frozen berries, which tend to be cheaper and also can be more nutrient dense. We use beef sticks or beef jerky that are uncured, all natural ingredients. I offer the kids cheese and fresh fruits that I can cut up for them or leave on the table that they can eat when they're ready. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, is giving kids an opportunity to listen to their bodies, listen to their bellies. They have a little snack area in our pantry. They can go there for some blood sugar balancing snacks. So the beef sticks, pistachios, coconut-based snacks. And then they have access to the refrigerator. So they can grab a little orange, an apple. They can have cheese, guacamole, or whole milk yogurt. So those are snacks they can have throughout the day. And then we do take an hour or so window before I start cooking a meal. There are no snacks to be had during that time. That way they can reset their appetite for lunch and for dinner. So lunch looks like me making a quick protein for our lunch. And that can be, usually it's ground beef, because I get organic grass-fed ground beef at our grocery store that's discounted, and I get that for about $6 a pound. So I just love that I can beat any fast food price with my family of 5. I can do it quicker than if we got in the car and went through the drive-through. I can do that by cooking a pound of ground beef or 2 pounds if you need to, and that's done in 10 minutes. I put it family style in the middle of our table, and I've got a 3-year-old, 6-year-old, and 9-year-old, and they come around and build their own lunch each day. So they get to put on their toppings. That can look like a cheeseburger bowl. So they can add ketchup, mustard, and potato chips that are cooked in avocado oil or olive oil, or they can make it a taco bowl. Some days they like to do that too. They can add cheese, sour cream, salsa, cilantro, lettuce, and it's just a great way to allow them to choose their lunch. And it helps me to not get burned out on cooking something and then maybe someone doesn't like it. Instead, they're very much involved. They get to be their own little chef. And that really helps with picky eating, or I like to say particular eating, because we all have our own opinions around what we'd like to eat each day, including kids. So this gives them a chance to build their own food. And that really does only take 10 or 15 minutes to prepare. And oftentimes they want to be in there. My daughter loves to help make the ground beef, so she gets to do all the seasonings. I just set the seasonings out for her, and she knows how much to sprinkle on now that she's done it so many times. So that's been great to include the kids along the way. That way I don't get burned out. Then after lunch, we play outside, and we like to be outside when it's nice out for at least half the day. So that's where they're doing a lot of their learning, and we're talking about the local plants and insects, and they're counting and building rock towers and all sorts of fun things outside. But then usually it's time for another snack. And this is where our budget can start to get some strain, but we can talk about budget ideas. But again, with the snack, we're balancing blood sugar. So we've got the whole milk yogurt or berries, the beef stick and cheese, chips and guacamole. So it's similar snacks to the kids, but they're always building their own. So that's where there's so much variety comes in, because some days my son wants frozen wild blueberries with some cream, and that makes almost like a little ice cream for him. There's no sugar added into that. So I'm happy that he's building his own snack, and he knows that he needs to clean it up and put it away when he's done. And then sometimes they want to make a little tray of some natural deli meat, cheese, and some mustard to dip it into, add a pickle. And that's a really great snack to balance our blood sugar all the way to dinner. So dinner looks like, again, protein is our main focus with healthy fats. And we do all sorts of plates, bowls, soups, different ways of including a protein, a vegetable, 2 or 3 vegetables, and then a carbohydrate. For us, we eat gluten-free, and I recommend that to a lot of families. We tend to do better, less inflammation when we don't have gluten, and there's different reasons for that. But if you can have ancient grains and different things, that's great too. But that's dinner for us. And then they end on another fat or protein snack. And if you didn't have kids, that would sound like a whole lot of food throughout the day. But when you have kids, you know that they are growing and moving constantly and they need a lot of fuel. So our day includes a lot of protein, a lot of healthy fats, and foods as close to nature as possible.
One thing that I have learned and I really picked up in the past couple of years, I mean, we kept hearing about protein, and it isn't always pushed as something for women or children. But more and more, I'm seeing people talk about that. And I have found for myself that I eat less. I don't need as much. I don't need to fill in with any kind of junk food or anything when I eat enough protein every day. And so I've noticed just a difference in myself. Now, I do have a 17 and 20-year-old young men, and they're going to the gym and they're trying to grow their muscles. And there is a lot of protein in my house. And since I have increased my protein too, my husband's like, wow, we're going through a lot of meat. But I'm like, yes, but I'm not buying as much extra kind of fluff stuff. So I'm going to give a plug for the protein too. One thing I do love about that is that you talking about your meals is the snacks and the lunch. The kids have a lot of say in that because kids don't have, in a lot of situations, they just have to go along with things and they have opinions. And so this probably helps. I would assume that this probably helps maybe some contention about meals, or I don't like this. And they act because they actually have a choice. So how do moms encourage their kids to eat the meals they prepared, and any tips for picky, or you said particular eaters?
That is such a great question, because really we can spend all this time making a beautiful meal, and then if our kids don't want to eat it, it can feel really discouraging. And if we did that day after day, then moms eventually want to give up and be done cooking. So that is exactly what you're saying is a huge part of meal making in the family. The first thing I recommend is demonstrating to our kids what healthy eating looks like. So as moms, we know, especially homeschooling moms, we are in an apprenticeship with our child. So they are watching everything we're doing. So whether it's about math or reading or our spiritual walk, they're watching us and emulating what we're doing. So I really recommend this with how we eat, is that our kids can see that we're sitting down with them. We're eating the same food at the same table at the same time. So a lot of times, especially homeschool moms, there's a lot to do. You could always be doing dishes and laundry and cleaning up and just grabbing a coffee and not eating lunch or dinner with our kids or even snacks. But I really recommend that you're putting your oxygen mask on first. I know we hear this a lot, but we really do have to nourish ourselves first, because I find that I run out of patience. If I have only lived off of, for me, my hot cocoa, I actually don't tolerate caffeine. But if I only lived off of that throughout the day, I'm going to bump into some issues with my behavior and mood. And then they won't see, how does an adult sit down and eat? I put my napkin on my lap. I'm sitting down with them. I'm nourishing myself to fuel my body to continue on with the activities and requirements of my day. And so my kids see me every lunch and nearly every snack, every dinner there. I'm sitting with them and having the meal at the same place. So if I've got a high chair, that's being pulled up to the table next to us. We're not eating some over here at the bar, some here at the table. We're all gathered around the table together. That's an important centerpiece of our home, because as we know from so many studies, when we reconnect with the family over the dinner table, and in homeschool families, we get the luxury of lunch table, breakfast table, snack table. We're all there multiple times a day, reconnecting, replugging in. So number one being demonstrate it yourself. Number two is that I really recommend studying our children. So we don't all have the same taste preferences. God gave us so much variety in our personalities and our taste buds and our microbiota. So we all crave different foods. And as homeschool moms, we get this amazing opportunity to really sit with our kids and see, what do they like to eat? An example of this, I really didn't have particular eater so much in our home. They will eat what I make, but that's because I've studied them. So one of our sons, he had a terrible stomach sickness one summer. And after that, he hated onions. I don't know if it was a meal he had or he happened to have gotten sick when he had just had a meal with onions, but he couldn't stand the look of them, the smell. And so at first I was like, are you just being challenging here with this meal? Like, we always have onions. What is going on? But I noticed he really, really meant it. And so I cut out onions from my cooking, and I had to adjust to that. So at first I only did garlic, and he was fine with fresh garlic. Then slowly I added in leeks, and that is a more mild allium option. And then leeks he was okay with. So we've moved on to shallots, and just recently I've been able to incorporate onions back into the meals. But I really wanted to honor his preference because he wasn't trying to be difficult. This wasn't an unnecessary pushback. Something legitimately happened inside his body. And so if I just kept forcing him to have that wouldn't be honoring him. And I really want our kids to have that autonomy as they grow up. Like, I need to know what is it that I like so that I can, when someone's not treating me how I want to, or I don't want to eat that food, I can really make that decision for myself. So when we study our kids, that can be really helpful to avoid some of these pitfalls we can get into with picky eating. And then the next thing is allowing time and exposure to multiple foods. So this starts actually in utero. So when I was pregnant with my kids, as much as I could, I would try to expose them to different foods that I was eating. And then I was able to breastfeed. And so I would eat different spice levels of food while I was breastfeeding to expose them to foods that way. They're getting small amino acids and protein components of the food. And so their microbiota is getting set up to try those foods later on. And then we did baby-led weaning with each of our kids. So they got to sit at a high chair with multiple soft foods available to them. And if they were squishing it, smelling it, looking at it, that's a wonderful way to start their palate off for life. So my kids love curry. They like to try all sorts of meals, and we get cookbooks that are more international cuisine that we'll try. So right now my daughter's trying some foods in a cookbook from Africa, and it's just fun to see them give it a try because I've always given them the option that they could just smell it, they can poke it, they can look at it, they don't have to take a bite and they don't have to like it. Because even for me, if I asked you to go get me some food and you picked anything off a menu, that might not have been my choice. And so we can honor that our kids have that same preference. They aren't trying to be picky or difficult. We just naturally have things we like or don't like. And then, like I said, allowing them to cook with me has been huge. So all of my kids, the goal is that they'll know multiple recipes by the time they graduate, and they're well on their way to doing that. My daughter asked to cook breakfast. She wants to make lunch. That's my 9-year-old. And she'll make dinner and bake for us, and she gets excited to do it. I don't push them like, I need you to cook so I can go do this. But a lot of times if I have the energy, I bring them along to do that. And we cook with things that kids tend to love, which is creaminess, higher fat foods, and higher protein. So these are foods that kids love. And for so many years, we were told to count calories or avoid fat. And really, our brains are at least 60% fat. Kids are full of fat. They're little fluffy. Their brains are wanting fat, and that helps calm their mood. It's like a big hug for their mood when they have fat. So we use, if you can have dairy, we use butter, cheese, and cream in our cooking, and lots of spices. Because I try to compete with all those food options out in the world, which have lots of yummy flavors like onion powder and garlic powder and dried parsley. These are in a lot of the boxed, seasoned foods that you can buy at the store. We just add them to our own. So including kids, studying them, and giving them foods that they actually crave, listening to their taste buds, is a way to avoid some of the pitfalls of getting stuck into picky eating.
I appreciate your encouragement to include the kids because then they feel a part of it. And whenever we make something, we feel we're more inclined to maybe try it. So maybe even if you're going to try a new meal, have the kids come and join you and do that. But let's talk real quick before we close out here about budget. You mentioned it a little bit. Is it really possible to eat well when you have a grocery budget? And are there any tips that you have for us?
Well, budget is such a huge component of feeding our kids. And really, that's where eating well can become difficult because it's hard to study everybody's taste buds at first. And if you're not used to how quickly a child eats, it can become discouraging. And then we've got to balance our budget with all of this as well. And I really recommend starting out, or wherever you're at now in your marriage and in your family life, getting a very clear family budget in place. So I'm grateful. Early on, my husband and I had the gift of doing Dave Ramsey CDs at the time. And so this was about 12 years ago. We've been married now. But we started off with cash envelope system and we followed it to a T. So we had $125 in our weekly grocery budget envelope. That was in cash. And because of that really strict amount of money that's in the envelope, and I didn't want to dip into our other envelopes, I studied the grocery stores. Where are the cheapest items? What can I buy to really stretch our budget? And as you'll quickly find, snacks and desserts, those are often the first thing on the chopping block. Those have to go. If I have a budget, I've got to really feed us first in our meals. So eggs typically are an affordable breakfast item. Don't know where we're at right now with egg things going on, but typically feeding our families well with some butter and eggs and cheese, that can really stretch the budget because that protein and fat is a long burning fuel. So we can go a lot further on that than we can a plain piece of toast. And so protein and fat for breakfast, protein and fat for lunch, and for dinner. That's how we're able to stretch that budget. Once we've purchased our pounds of meat that we need each week within our family budget, then we add our vegetable, we add our grain component. We will then do snacks if we have room after that. And snacks for us would look like apples and oranges or any fruit that's in season. Cheese sticks can be a nice, affordable protein snack. Beef sticks if they're at the grocery store that we get discounted groceries. So we are really stretching our time with our energy when we have protein and fat, and we're saving snacks and desserts for the very end. And then things like buying frozen fruit is a great way to save. There's so many different tips, but first we've got to have an actual budget to go off of. So in our family, we have a budget poster. And so we keep track with a bar graph of our budget. And that way it becomes a game. So we've gamified it for our kids. We save the receipt, we bring it home, and we get to do the bar graph together. And sometimes the kids will see this snack at the grocery store. And they're like, oh my goodness, how is this $20 for a box of bars? And they say, that's a budget buster. And it's cute how they have that terminology now. But they're like, we cannot get that. That is a budget buster. And so they are looking for deals with us, which becomes really fun. And then they're following our budget. And we have a family goal. So right now we live on a small property. In the future, we are dreaming and praying about having more property. So when we have a family goal, that really helps us stay on budget. We are looking for, again, those cheaper grocery stores, items that are on discount, and we only go to the grocery store once a week. That is the biggest part of staying on budget. These are ways that we're able to stay on a family budget and make it fun for the kids.
Having that budget and including the kids is so important. I love your intentionality because these are skills that are going to help them further in life, not just mom goes and does this, but actually is including them. This is what the groceries is, creating a menu and staying in the budget. And it's so fun for them to recognize that. They'll be so much more empowered. And hopefully when they get out into the world on their own, and hopefully this encourages other moms. So the listener wants to be able to connect with you a bit more, Chandis. Where can we send them?
You can go to my website, which is closetonature.health. And there you'll find that I have created with my husband, who's a Christian videographer. We have made a 12-part video series that really the goal was to be creation-based, fun for the whole family. We talk about the Bible throughout this series, just a way for moms to learn from the comfort of their home how to eat close to nature, balance their blood sugar, and lots of downloads with that, meal planning tips, recipes, my grocery store exact list to grocery stores like Walmart are on there. And your listeners, I would love to give them 20% off if they use Little by Little code at checkout. So that's one word, Little by Little, and that's 20% off the series. So that's far cheaper than meeting with me one-on-one in nutritional counseling. And that was my goal for Christian moms to have access to this information, no matter what their budget is. So there's also an email on that website. You can find my email and you can email me scholarship. I love to do this with moms who are in a place where they can't afford to do the series. you can email scholarship and I will send you a scholarship link. So that way you can watch it for free and include your kids so that they can become lifelong nutrition learners as well.
Wonderful. I will include all of those links in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.